Hi guys, welcome to True Crime Wine Wednesday. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I'm so glad you found me. If you're not new here, welcome back. Thank you for coming to hang out with me every single Wednesday. You know, if I could reach through the screen right now and just like squish your little faces and hug you, I would. I love and I appreciate you so much. I'm so sad because I was really loving the whole riddle thing and you guys were loving it too, and then last week I completely forgot to put a new riddle in the video. So today I have another one for you, and I think the general consensus from everybody was to put the answer to the riddle at the end of the video because you guys can't wait until next week and I can't either. But I did like that you guys were still like sharing your answers in the comments, so I guess for anybody who doesn't want to like spoil it for themselves before the end of the video, don't like scroll because a lot of you guys were guessing and pretty much all of you were right. You're very intelligent. Alright, so today's riddle is: a man was shot in the heart. Nobody tries to save him and it doesn't kill him. What happened? I'll have the answer for you guys at the end of the video. Before we get started, I want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor who has been helping me out so much lately. It's the language app Babbel. I have been so excited to use this because there is something that I have been keeping on the low lately. Not because I want to keep anything from you guys, but I'm just kind of the person who, like, I don't, I guess, process things until it's like days or weeks away, which in my case, like, what I've been keeping from you is now like around the corner, and that is that we are moving to Mexico for 6 months. So I really wanted to learn some Spanish so I could fit in a little bit more, learn important questions like "Más vino, por favor." I was actually using another app before I tried Babbel, and it was fun and it was good, but I felt like I wasn't learning like really important day-to-day conversation pieces. And then once I tried Babbel, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. I'm pretty much a local now. Hola, me llamo Sherrilyn. Bienvenida a mi canal, Miércoles de Vino. See? Like I was born there. But seriously guys, it is amazing how fast I have learned Spanish. It's helped me so much, and it's even helped me brush up a little bit on my French as well, because once upon a time I used to be fluent and be able to communicate with my family in Quebec, and now I understand, but I always just reply in English because I'm like really insecure about like my grammar and stuff. I mean, you guys know like what I'm like with the English language, so yeah. So I'm really excited to be able to have the option to like brush up on that as well and learn a whole new language too. If there's anything that you have been wanting to explore and learn, or something you also have been wanting to brush up on, Babbel is offering 65% off to my true crime family members. So I will leave the link for that in the description for you guys below. I'd love to know what you have always wanted to learn, what you want to check out, maybe what you want me to learn with you. I'd love to have a couple under my belt. So this app is definitely my jam, and I can't wait to learn some more languages with you guys. Gracias, Babbel. Okay, today is a doozy. I'm definitely just gonna like keep to how I usually deliver these cases and not get like super graphic or anything, but I mean just like by me like making gestures or using like certain words, you guys will get the point. And the guy we're talking about today is quite a piece of work. Pretty graphic, so although most of it will be left to your imagination, it's not going to be hard for you guys to like figure out what I'm trying to get at. Today we are talking about Ed Kemper. He's also known as the co-ed killer. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was reading about his story and watching some documentaries on it, there were certain points where I was just like, oh, like, yeah, you didn't really like get the greatest shot, and there's definitely some like environmental elements here that probably contributed to like why he ended up the way he did, and you almost feel sorry for him. And then you're like, you hear like in detail about what he did to his victims, and you're just like, no, Ed, no. There's just no feeling sorry for you. I mean, obviously I will let you guys decide for yourselves, but I just wanted to like put that out there because there were times where I was reading and I was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, that's not fun. That's not nice. But then I also had to like step out and realize like what he did to other people, like they were real people, and you don't just get to take that out on innocent, wonderful people. So let's go to the beginning. Ed was born on December 18th, 1948 in Burbank, California. He was the middle child to his mother, Clarnell, and his dad, Edmund II. The Kempers had a little girl 6 years prior to having Ed. Ed was the only boy, and 2 years after Ed was born, another little sister joined the family. They grew up in a very strict house. It was primarily run by his mother. His father was a World War II veteran, and he was said to be kinder in the house. He was the one that the kids went to when they just needed a little bit of nurturing and comfort. I don't know if it was because he was the only boy, but it said that Edmund II was softer to Ed III. We're just going to call him Ed Jr. And Clarnell didn't like that. She felt like if you were being soft and tender to a boy, you were giving him like wimpy vibes and he was going to grow up to be too sensitive or even gay. I mean, I realize this was like 1940s, 50s. It's still annoying though. A, that's not what makes you turn out gay. And B, who cares? So when Clarnell would see Ed Sr. treating Ed like very lovingly, she would berate him and say that he was just trying to raise another wimp like him. This happened so much that eventually Ed Sr. just kind of pulled away from his son and he didn't want to have much to do with him because it just like saved an argument and just like hearing like this noise from his wife in his ear. This made Ed Jr. really crave attention and he just didn't know how to go about it. At school, he wasn't getting any because he was quite bullied. He was very intelligent, but he got awful grades because he kind of saw the teachers like as like an authority figure like his mom, so it made him not want to like excel or, you know, appease them because he was so angry with her at home. And he was also really tall for his age, so the kids often picked at that specifically. Really early on, this kind of started to develop quite unhealthy thoughts and wanting to act out creepy fantasies for like a young, well, for anybody, but like a young boy specifically. But at night, he would steal his father's gun and go to his teacher's house and just watch her outside of the window, like holding this gun. And then while he's watching her, he's imagining like harming her and then like having like romantic encounters with her. He never acted out on anything, but things just escalated from there. And when he was 9 years old, his parents got divorced. Ed Jr. and his sisters moved with their mother away to Montana, which was pretty detrimental to Ed because he was definitely closer with his dad, and now they're in Montana and his dad moved just outside of LA. This caused him to lash out at home. Usually it wasn't at any of the family members, but it was doing things like cutting off the hands and the heads of his sister's dolls. And then when destroying the dolls wasn't enough, he turned to the family cats. Something I learned when watching a documentary on this case is a lot of serial killers will start with cats if they've got hate for women, and that's because cats are like a symbol of females. And I found that really interesting because like when you think about it, you're just like, okay, they kind of are. And I would see like more like dogs maybe like as like a male symbol, like a wolf. I don't know, it made sense to me. Twice he killed the family cat. Once was because he felt like the cat liked his sisters more than it liked him and he felt rejected. I won't go into detail what he did, but it was vicious. There was just like no mercy. It was awful. When they got a second cat, Ed did the same thing to this cat, and he decided he was going to keep the remains of this cat in his closet, and he left to go and visit family out of town. And while he was gone, his mom found the remains of the cat in his closet, and she writes a letter to him asking, you know, like if he had anything to do with it, and he says no. She doesn't really believe him, but it was just kind of left at that. It was obvious that she knew something was going on with Ed though, because it came to the point where she would lock him in the basement and he only had a cot to sleep on down there. And she said her reasoning for doing that was because she feared that he would harm her or her girls in the middle of the night. But his parents never sought any help for him. I don't know if his mom just thought, you know, like the meaner she is, the more she just kind of like berates him, eventually he'll just like get it and be the child that she wanted him to be. It gets to the point where he can't take it anymore though, and when he's 14 years old, he runs away from home and he goes to his dad's house in Van Nuys. And when he shows up, he sees that his dad kind of has like a whole new life now, and he's not really a part of it. He's remarried, he has a stepson now, and Ed kind of felt like he was replaced. His dad did welcome him in the home, and he stayed for a little bit, but that resentment and the tension just started to grow, and it got even stronger against his dad when he took Ed to go and visit his parents, Ed's grandparents, Maud and Edmund Sr., and a lot of Eds going on, in North Fork for Christmas. And when it was time for them to go back home, Ed's dad just leaves and goes, and then leaves him with his grandparents. His grandmother Maud was a artist and a children's book author, and you'd figure that would, in my mind, okay, like she's like sweet, good with kids. No, she allegedly was very similar to his mother. She belittled him and his grandfather all the time. His grandfather, he was much closer to. He was a farmer who spent most of his life working in the transportation industry. It sounded like he was the only male in Ed's life that really wanted to take the time to spend with him, give him attention. He bought him a rifle once so that they could go hunting together. He encouraged him to enjoy hunting, and he even offered money to get as many gophers off the property as he could. So at first, Ed was showing really good signs of improving. He was enrolled in high school out there and doing better academically. In terms of being a good student, his teachers had no complaints. I don't think he was, popular or anything like that. He still found it quite hard to make friendships, but it seemed on the outside that he was enjoying life a little bit more out there. This is really short-lived though, because Ed Sr. starts showing signs of dementia, and it started to affect his relationship with his wife because he was the breadwinner. He was the one who took care of everything in the house, and she liked having somebody take care of him. So when the role was reversed and now all of a sudden she had to care for him, she didn't like it very much. So it made her even angrier and meaner. She'd say things that both Eds weren't doing enough to show her that they were men and they weren't taking care of her enough. Sometimes when you read about this stuff, you're just you just want to your husband's got dementia. He's taking care of you your whole life. And this just keeps building. And so Ed, he's just becoming a ticking time bomb and building up more and more resentment towards his grandmother every single day. One afternoon when his grandfather's out buying groceries, he's at home with his grandmother and they're sitting at the kitchen table and they get into a heated argument about something. And Ed excuses himself from the table and he goes and he grabs the rifle that his grandfather bought him. I guess he came back into the kitchen and he just stood there in front of his grandma holding this rifle, and she's like, "Oh, you're not gonna go out there and try to kill any more birds, are you?" And he's just not saying anything, just still staring at her. Turns around, walks out of the room, and then pauses, and he just remembers everything that she has said and done to upset him, and everything his mother has said and done, and his father in terms of rejecting him. And he comes back into the kitchen and he shoots his grandmother. After he shoots her, he brings her to her bedroom, but he realizes that his grandfather is going to come home any minute and see his wife like this. Not only just realize that Ed is the one who did it, but he was worried that he was going to see his wife in this condition, and Ed didn't want that. So his solution for it was to go outside when he heard his grandfather arrive and shoot him too, so he'd never have to see his wife dead. Once everything sets in, he realizes what he's done and he doesn't know what to do. So he calls his mother and he says, I accidentally shot Grandma and Grandpa. And she said, okay, well, you need to hang up with me and call the police. So he does that and he waits at the house for them for over an hour until they arrive. When they take him into the station and question him, he is no longer saying that it's an accident. And he tells the police that he wanted to know what it was going to feel like to kill Grandma. So he's taken into custody. He undergoes therapy and he's diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic. So he doesn't have to go to juvenile detention or anything like that, but he is sent to Atascadero State Hospital. And here at the time, there was over 1,600 patients there, and many of them were murderers. And I heard there was only 10 staff members on the unit. So as a teen, when he's quite impressionable and already struggling, this isn't the ideal environment. It was here, though, that he found out that he was quite personable and very likable. He started realizing that the staff favored him over any of the other patients, and it gave him a lot more freedom. With this freedom, he was able to access a lot of confidential documents, so it allowed him to study what doctors were writing about other patients and kind of what they were looking for to see if they were rehabilitated or what needed to change, and he would memorize what he should say and do in all of his assessments so that he could excel in the program and be released faster. As he's going through sessions, the doctors realize that he's not schizophrenic, and they diagnose him with a personality disorder, and for them, they look at it like if it's a personality disorder, he's able to control it or kind of morph into something different and I guess more acceptable to society. So after being there for only 5 years, he was released when he was 20 years old. He's an adult now, and physically he's very changed, grown quite a bit. He's 6'9" and 245 pounds. He's a big boy. I feel like when you're releasing somebody of that stature, you have to be really confident in your decision to release them out into society. So it makes you think and realize how much he fooled them that he had been rehabilitated, because they were just you're good to go. It said that he had an IQ of 145, so it makes sense in terms of that probably being easy for him to, memorize what he needed to do and just act it out. When he was released, it was advised that he not be returned to his mother's custody. Unfortunately, though, the youth authority that he was released to didn't follow those instructions, and he was released back to his mother. Naturally, he's really lonely when he's released. He was very interested in women, but he's very insecure because he just spent, those crucial adolescent years in a state hospital. I listened to this one doctor explain, trying to imagine what that would have been like approaching women when you're, just you have those urges and you want to meet someone of the opposite sex and have a relationship for the first time, but you just have no idea how to go about it. It's hey, I'm Ed. I'm a Sagittarius vegetarian. I killed my grandparents and just spent 5 years in a mental institution. So what do you do on Sundays? On top of that, he's also living at home with his mom, and their relationship is even more toxic than it was before. He had goals to get out of his mom's house, though. He attended a community college and he wanted to become a police officer. Before applying, he got jobs here and there to save some money so that he could get out of his mom's house. For a brief time, he did get a roommate. But as many, first-time mover-outers, and him not having a lot of, life experience at that point, he can't afford it, so he moves back with his mom, which really was no different than moving away from her, because I guess when he did move out of his mom's house, she would still call all the time or just show up at his apartment unexpectedly, and then while she was there, she would nag him about what he's doing in life or the place not being clean. So it's they had a really toxic relationship, but she couldn't stay away and he couldn't, because when he couldn't afford living on his own, he moved back with her. In 1973, he briefly gets engaged to a high school student who is 16 years old, and he's 20. So I think, one of the smarter things that Clarnell nagged him about was that he needed to find somebody his own age. And this was something that she was not letting up on. It wasn't a couple times that she's you really should find somebody your own age. I guess it got to the point where she was harassing both of them, saying how wrong it was and how he needed to end the relationship. So, I mean, yeah, she's not wrong. It was the right thing to do. So the engagement didn't last long, and Ed goes to his mom and he's okay, well, if you don't want me to be with this girl particularly, why don't you introduce me to a girl that you think is appropriate for me instead? And at the time, Clarnell was working at a university nearby, so he suggested, maybe a student that would be good for me. And then she told him, absolutely not. Like, you'd never be good enough for any of the girls in university. You're just like your father. You'll do just like what he did. Up and abandon your wife and your family. So it's like, he's like, all right, well, like, shit. He's always trying to appease his mother, though, and so he does want to attract a more mature girl, and he decides, you know, like, if she's not gonna help me, I'm gonna do this on my own, and the first thing I need to do is, like, get a stable job. Since he was always fascinated with criminology and wanting to be a police officer, that's where he set his goals, but unfortunately, he didn't qualify, and it wasn't because of his previous record. He was turned down because his height made him too tall to join the force. This just adds more frustration to him because the height thing had been something he had always been bullied about his whole life. It was even something that his mom would comment on and like call him like a weirdo. So it's another blow that he has no control over. He ends up working for the Department of Transportation instead. It seems like he liked his job. He was doing really well at it, made quite a bit of money, enough for him to be able to move out of his mom's again. One day at work, he gets hit by a car and sues the driver. He's given $15,000 in the settlement, which I read like with inflation was like close to like $90,000 today. With the money, he buys a Ford Galaxy. I meant to look at what a Ford Galaxy is. I don't know what a Ford Galaxy is, so let's look at it together. Oh, yeah. Okay, I've seen these. Interesting. Okay, so he gets one of those, and his favorite thing to do is to drive around and look at girls, and this is where things take a turn for the worse. There is no shortage of women for him to look at. This is Santa Cruz in the 70s. This is like the hippie generation where people are outside like peace and love. They're hitchhiking. Everyone is really quite trusting. And he starts wanting to pick up some of these hitchhikers. It starts with him just wanting to give these girls rides, and he does it for quite a while, and then it just kind of grows from there, and that just doesn't become enough to sustain him. In his mind, he's planning out these urges that he has on wanting to harm people, but he doesn't want to get caught, so he thinks that the best plan is to continue just giving these women rides and working out in his head, you know, like different scenarios, like while they're in the car, okay, if I did this, how would I make it that they wouldn't escape or no one would see me and I wouldn't get caught? He plays these out in his head, but he doesn't act on it, and he just lets them go. He does this with like 150 women until it gets to the point that he feels confident enough to act out on his urges and not get caught. It's May 7th, 1972, and he picks up two 18-year-old roommates and good friends, Marianne Pesh and Anita Lakessa, near Berkeley University campus. The girls were hitchhiking for the first time to go visit friends in Stanford. They were so beautiful, full of life, very fun, very popular. Marianne had a little bit more world experience, and it sounds like she kind of brought some of that excitement and that curiosity to Anita. Anita grew up the oldest sibling on her family farm. She was very close with her family, even though she lived on campus when she was attending school during the week. It was a priority for her to come home and spend most weekends with her family. Marianne was one of 5 children, and her brother was also attending the same university, which helped her parents feel a little bit more comfortable, you know, like having each other out there to keep an eye out on one another. Marianne came from a very wealthy family. Many of her neighbors were Hollywood stars. There was also a period in her life where she lived with her family in Germany for 7 years for her father to do work out there. While they were there, they traveled all across Europe. She even took up skiing and I guess had such a talent for it that she wanted to pursue it and go into the Olympics. And she even spoke German. That day, it said that Marianne and Anita were in a mood where they were wanting to just explore and seek adventure and meet new people. So they were offered a ride by one of their friends to go to Stanford, and they turned it down because they wanted to hitchhike instead. Ed's the one who pulls over, and initially they're a little bit taken back. I mean, even though he's not out of the car, it's visible like how big of a man he is. But he had gotten these stickers from the university from his mom, and he had them on his bumper. So he's like, no, like I associated with the university. I think he said that he might have been a student, and it made them feel more comfortable, so they got in. As they get in, he works on this maneuver that he had practiced like during these 150 trial runs, and he reaches over to say like, oh, I don't think you closed the door properly. And as he reaches over to, pretend that he's just like gonna reopen and close the door, he has a chapstick in his hand. When he reaches over, he drops it behind the door handle, so it like falls between the mechanism that if anyone would like try to open the door fully, you wouldn't be able to because it was blocking it. The girls don't notice this though, and he starts to build their trust. They're making small talk, and eventually they realize he is driving way past where they need to go. He takes them to an isolated area. Naturally, they start panicking. To try and calm them down, he pulls the gun out and he says that if you cooperate, I'll let you guys go. So Marianne is like, okay, well, we'll do what you say. He tells Marianne to follow him and walk to the trunk. So as she's walking, she just has this gut feeling that he's not gonna let them go, and she knows this is her one opportunity to fight back and try to save herself. She puts up a fight, and with him being so tall, it's not much of a struggle, but during it, she is able to kick the tail light out of the back of the car. This just sent Ed over the top. He takes a knife out to stop her from struggling. Poor Anita, who's in the car, unable to get out because like the door is jammed, sees what's going on. She knows she's next. He also stabs Anita and puts both girls in the trunk. And on his way home, since that tail light was kicked out, he gets pulled over by a police officer, but he's able to explain his way out of it and assures him, I'm gonna get this fixed as soon as I get into the city, like nothing to worry about. And so instead of checking anything out, the police officer lets him go. When it came to Ed, it was bad enough that he killed anybody, but it was what he did after that makes him like so horrific. With all of his victims, he usually kept them overnight. With these girls being his first, he took them back to his apartment. And initially the plan was just to bring them into his apartment, but he had been so enraged that he felt emasculated that Marianne had tried to fight back, that he just went and like dismembered them in the parking lot, like when they were in the trunk. And he said like he didn't even care if his neighbors saw. Unfortunately, no one did see, because if they did, this would probably have, ended any further death. And it allowed him to bring the remains to his apartment and spend the evening with them. Again, I'm not going to be descriptive, but he engaged in relations. Keep in mind, everything wasn't intact, most notably their heads. Yeah. And then in the morning, he brought their remains to the mountains, where he discarded them in several different locations so that he couldn't get caught as easy. The next day, their families reported both of them missing immediately, but they were given the common students run away, especially in this time of it being the 70s. They felt like they ran off to, go live this easy breezy life with some surfer dude and, not to worry. But their parents knew it was just not like them at all. It eventually got to the point where they had to hire their own private investigator. Unfortunately, he wasn't the one to find them, but 2.5 months after they had disappeared, a hiker did find their remains on the mountain. Once they were found, there was quite a bit of talk around town about what had happened, and Ed was able to overhear and be involved in conversation firsthand with the police officers, because he used to frequent a bar that all of the off-duty police officers went to, which was called the jury room. Everybody who went there knew Ed. They liked him. They said he was personable. Again, this was something that he learned when he was in the hospital, how he could gain people's trust. And despite being this huge guy, he was really likable, and everybody referred to him as being a gentle giant. he wouldn't engage in conversation and like entertain conversation and ask questions about like where the investigation was going, but he was always listening to see like where they were at in terms of, you know, getting close to solving it. And so he felt pretty confident that he wasn't going to get caught ever, if, you know, anytime soon. That makes no sense. Anytime soon, if not ever. There we go. Initially, his plan was to space out the killing so it wasn't, you know, too much going on and them try to like pin it on one person. But on September 14th, he gets in a huge fight with his mother and he leaves the house to go for a drive. And he says while he's driving, he feels what he calls zapples. And it's the urge for him to harm another individual and he just can't control it. It really made me uncomfortable reading that because I describe when I was trying to get off my antidepressant medication like a long time ago. We're back on, we're doing much better now. But when I was pregnant with Oriana, I wanted to quit cold turkey, and I described like the withdrawal of that medication as brain zaps, and a lot of you actually were able to relate to that. Like that's just, I don't know, that's how I can explain it. So for him to be like, he felt like zapples of like these impulse and urges, I was just like, ooh. So he's dealing with these zapples, and around 7 p.m. he sees a 15-year-old girl named Aiko Ku, and she's waiting for a bus. He pulls over. She tells him she needs to get to a dance audition that she missed her first bus for, and she has no way of contacting anyone to let them know that she's going to be late. So Ed offers her a ride. Aiko was raised by a very strong, intelligent, proud mother and her grandparents. And it sounded like they all just doted on her and they saw such potential in her life. Since she was 4 years old, they had her enrolled in dance lessons and they really saw a natural talent there for her. Her mom was not well off. She was the one who made all of Aiko's costumes. She worked multiple jobs to have her in the best dance academies and also in private schools so she could get the best education and, you know, just set her up for more of success in life. And this mama did it all on her own. Aiko's father was not in the picture and had not helped in any capacity her whole entire life. But I guess it was just something that her mom accepted and never made her feel bad about. She wanted to do everything that she could just to make her more successful in the future. And she was really proud to be her mom and like do it all on her own. When Ed saw Aiko, he said that he wanted to make this experience different. He felt like with Marianne and Anita, he had lost control over the situation. And this time he really wanted to gain her trust. And then, you know, like when she least expected it, turn on her. So when she gets in, he drives to San Francisco and the whole way they're talking, he's feeling like she's feeling quite comfortable and then he keeps driving. At first she doesn't really notice and then when she questions him, he says, "I'm kidnapping you." And naturally she is terrified, but he calms her down by saying, you know, like, it's not you, it's me. I don't want to live and I just didn't want to do this alone. But I think, you know, like just having your company here while I end it all will make me feel better. So he's able to calm her down and they just keep talking. I'm sure inside she's still absolutely terrified, but he builds enough of trust with her that there's a point where he got out of the car to go and get a weapon from the trunk and he accidentally locked himself out of the car, but he was able to convince her to open the door for him and let him in. At this point, he doesn't want to miss an opportunity and Aiko becomes his next victim. He brought her back to the house as well, engaged in relations similar to Marianne and Anita in the same condition as their bodies were, and then also got rid of the body in several different areas. Was really terrifying to think about like how well he was able to go on with like his day-to-day activity and avoid any suspicion of like acting different was that the day after he killed Aiko, he had an appointment with his psychologist. And when the appointment was done, the doctor said to him, "You know what, like I think we are good to go now. You seem to be like fully rehabilitated and you don't need to come and see me anymore." Meanwhile, downstairs, he hadn't even disposed of her body yet, and her was still in the trunk. Like Marianne and Anita's family, Aiko's mom knew the instant that she didn't come home by 11 that night that something was wrong. She called the dance studio first and she realized that Aiko didn't even make it there, period. So she calls the police to report her missing. Because of her age, the police did take it a little bit more seriously and acted on it faster, but that didn't prevent her mom and her grandparents from being out every single night searching the area. They waited at the bus stop to talk to people who were waiting for the bus to see if maybe they had seen her that night. And a couple days later, the newspaper ran a story about her disappearance, and there was a girl who actually came forward who had seen Aiko that night and said that she saw her at the bus stop and she had missed her bus, got impatient waiting for the next one, fearing that she was going to miss out on this opportunity at this audition. So when somebody had pulled over to offer her a ride, she took it. She said the only thing that she remembered was that the car looked like it was a little bit tan, and she could tell that it was a larger guy in the car with light brown hair, but that was all that she had to go off of. After they know she was hitchhiking and picked up by a driver, there is a warning that the police put out just saying for everybody to be careful. If you have to hitchhike, do it in multiple groups. It even got to the point where if police saw like a lone girl hitchhiking, they would take her to the station and hold her for a little bit. I guess this like stirred up a little bit of controversy because people felt like it was violating their rights of freedom, but in their mind they thought like they were keeping them safe and trying to find other means to like get them to their destination. Unfortunately, only a few months go by and these new measures do not help save the life of 18-year-old Cindy Shaw. She was the oldest of two daughters. She grew up in San Francisco, but she was living in Santa Cruz to go to school. And she was at the point in her life where she was kind of at that crossroad where she was unsure of what she wanted to do. She was going back and forth between being a teacher or a policewoman. In the meantime, she was making money babysitting for several families. One of them actually was a detective that was on the case of these missing girls. On the evening of January 8th, she's walking towards Cabrillo College and Ed sees her. Like with his other victims, he followed the same routine and took her somewhere isolated. After he killed her, he brought her back home. With her, he kept her in his room for a couple extra days though, because he felt like more of a attachment to her, he said. And when it came time to remove her body from the house, he decided to and he buried it in his mom's backyard, and he had it looking up to his mother's bedroom. He said that he did that so that she could look up to his mom because his mom loved when people looked up to her. Again, like you just have to remind yourself like this is real life. It was her roommate that noticed that she was missing, and she notified the police and her family, and it only took less than 24 hours for a patrol officer to find her remains. 5 days after Cindy, he comes across 23-year-old Rosalind Thor. She was a beautiful, intelligent student who had just finished school in linguistics and psychology. And she was kind of living that, college dream. She had 4 roommates. They all lived together in the apartment. And the night she went missing, it was one of her roommates that said she saw her leave that evening and said that she was going to be attending a lecture on campus, but she never returned. That same night, a 21-year-old named Alice Liu also doesn't come home, and her roommate reports her missing as well. I guess Alice was known as being a regular hitchhiker. That's how she primarily got to and from school every day. But when news spreads about them, everyone's kind of confused because the two of them didn't know each other, and they're both not the type to just like up and leave. So they're trying to figure out what the connection is. Everyone's hoping that it's like a positive one, maybe that they met, became fast friends, and went, like touring around the country. I'm sure you tell yourself like whatever you need to just like be positive. Unfortunately, a few weeks later on February 15th, their remains were found in the same condition as the other victims. Around this time, police had a lot on their plate. 4 days prior to their remains being found, police had arrested a guy named Herbert Mullins. He was also killing young girls in the area the exact same time that Ed was. I guess this like upset Ed quite a bit. He felt like he was really sloppy and he was gaining too much attention because his victims were being found quick. So he was really quite annoyed by him. And then when there's news that someone is arrested, they're not really sure if he's also connected to some of Ed's victims, and Ed takes it like quite personally. Again, that's on the inside. Outside, he's very good at just like maintaining his routine. He's still carrying on like normal, going to the jury room to have the drinks with the police every night, and no one suspects him. Which makes it a little bit more confusing when a few days after Herbert's arrest, a gun dealer contacts the police and says that he needs a more proper check done on a client that just came to purchase a revolver. He gives them the name and it's Ed. At first they're like, oh, like this, there's gonna be nothing. They know him as Gentle Giant. But when they pull up his record, they see that he was charged with this double murder when he was a kid. So police send over one of their like rookie detectives because the guys at the jury room know like how big he is and that he's a little bit intimidating, I'm sure, if he was angry. So they don't really want to rock the boat. Rock the boat, rock the boat, work the middle, change by The rookie doesn't know who Ed is, but he's told like he's quite large. So he goes to his mom's house and he's having trouble finding like the exact address. So he's driving around the parking lot and he sees this like skyscraper of a guy come out. So he knows like that's who he's there to talk to. I guess he just goes up and Ed's quite personable with him. He says that he's there to investigate a gun that he just purchased and that they need to do a little bit more of a background check on him before they can release it to him. So he just needs to like take it for a little bit for like protocol. So Ed's like, all right, no worries. And he pops his trunk and the officer says that he notices that there was no lining in the trunk. It was just like metal, but he didn't really think anything of it. And he was so cooperative. He just gave him the gun and he was like, I gotta hightail it out of here. At this point, the police know nothing. But in Ed's mind, he thinks that they're trying to trap him and catch him in the act. His mind is spiraling and he thinks that he's about to get caught any day and he doesn't want his mom to be embarrassed to find out that this is like the son that she raised. Even though he hated her, he never wanted to let her down. Like he did with his grandfather, he thought like the best thing to do was to just like kill her before she found out. She becomes his fifth victim and like the others, like the exact same routine goes down. Even down to relations with. And then once he's done, he places it on the mantle in the living room and he uses it as, I'm like so flustered because it's just so disturbing, but he uses it as like a dartboard. For shit's sakes, man. As it settles what he just did to his mother, he realizes that she's got a best friend who's in constant contact with her, and she's going to realize really soon that she's gone missing and that something's happened to her. So again, like he's just trying to get a jump on things. He invites poor Sally over. When she gets there, he also kills her and then goes on the run. I guess while he's on the run, he keeps going back and forth from wanting to get away and never be caught, but also wants to be caught so that he can be recognized for everything that he did. So he's listening to the radio 24/7. It's like 3 days straight and he's getting no sleep because he's wanting to hear his name and it doesn't happen. He's really frustrated and he decides that he's done killing. I guess when he had killed his mom, it released something in him that he didn't even realize that was like the ultimate goal for him. Like there was no more urges or thoughts because everything had led up to that moment. So he calls the police station and he tells the police officer that picks up that he's in Puebla. He's in a phone booth and he's done something terrible. He outright confesses that he killed his mom and her best friend and left them at his mother's house. And I guess at first the officer taking the call knew Ed, and he knew that like he was a jokester, he drank a lot. So at first he thought that he was just messing with him, and he's like, okay, yeah, Ed, like good one. And he hangs up on him. So Ed calls back and he asks to speak to the lead detective that is in charge of dealing with all of the missing girls. And this was called the co-ed killing case. When the detective gets on the phone, he starts giving him information that only the killer would know, and it's not until then that he's basically like, please believe me. They take it seriously. He stays on the phone with Ed, and other officers go to his mom's house. They find his mother and her best friend there, and then they stay on the phone with him while other units come and pick him up at this phone booth. I guess when he got picked up, it like just released like so much weight on his chest because he couldn't stop talking about what he had done and getting into graphic detail, telling them like every single thing that happened step by step. And it got to the point where the police officers in the car were like, you need to stop, because it was too graphic for them to even listen to. When they get to the police station, he does the same thing. Like, he's very cooperative and willing to confess. But even though he confessed, his lawyer enters a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. So on October 23rd, 1973, he's put on trial. All the prosecutors pretty much had to do was just play his confession, which was good in terms of locking him up, but all of the victims' families were there, and they just had to hear in this like arrogant, graphic detail what happened to their loved ones. On October 8th, Ed was found guilty of 8 counts of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. He asked for the death penalty at sentencing, but I guess in California at this time they had suspended it, so he was given 8 life sentences instead. He has been eligible for parole multiple times over the years, but each time that he goes in front of the parole board, he basically tells them that he's not ready to leave prison, like he's comfortable where he is. He says that, you know, society would not know what to do with him, and so it's always rejected, which is probably the best thing, and he also feels that way. His next eligibility it's in 2024. So let's hope he also doesn't want to come out and everybody feels the same. He's never really given a clear explanation for why he did what he did. He's only said that he did it because it gave him a sense of control. And I read like conflicting opinions. One just being that he's like a sociopath and was just born this way. And then there's others that feel like it's a product of the way that he was raised and verbal abuse, not only from his mother, but from his grandmother, and then being rejected by his father. And then on top of that, he spends like his adolescent years in this mental institution. So, I mean, I guess I can see like both ways. But like I said, it's like once you dissect it all and then like realize how innocent these victims were and how much they didn't deserve to take the brunt of his anger, there's just no excuse. I do feel like he does try to explain some of his crimes away in interviews, but he's also said that he likes to talk about it as openly as he does because he feels like it could prevent somebody who's watching him who might be feeling the same way as he was to be turned away from following the same path as he did. So, I mean, I guess there's that. I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts. As always, I can't wait to catch up in the comments. And the answer to today's riddle, I'll give you a reminder of what the riddle was. A man was shot in the heart. Nobody tries to save him, and it doesn't kill him. What happened? The answer is the man was already dead before getting shot in the heart. So that's why no one tried to save him. I'm curious to see how many of you little smarty pants got it right. Thank you again to our sponsor today, Babbel. If you guys want to check out the app, don't forget they have an offer for you of 65% off, and I will leave that link in the description for you below. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You know it means the world to me. I love and I appreciate you so, so much. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly until then. Make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.